Welcome back to the Bob Fu Report. Lin Zhao, formerly known as Peng Lin Zhao, was born in 1932. She was a Chinese Christian born in Suzhou City, Jiangsu Province. And she was one of the earliest Christian martyrs after Chairman Mao launched that brutal Cultural Revolution in 1966. Professor Lian Xi from Duke University Divinity School published a biography of Lin Zhao's life titled Bloody Letters. So this is the book called Bloody Letters. It's a very moving testimony of this young female Christian martyr. She was once detained in Shanghai #1 detention center, the same prison as the modern-day Lin Zhao, a Christian citizen, journalist, and a lawyer, Zhang Zhisheng, who was imprisoned for her truth-telling work from the very beginning of the Wuhan virus in 2020. And for that, China Aid rewarded her, Zhang Zhisheng, as the 2021 recipient of Lin Zhao Freedom Award. So Lin Zhao, who is Lin Zhao in her life? At Shanghai #1 detention center, also in the Tilanqiao prison, she authored a series of notes and letters written in her own blood. Basically, she beat her fingers and cut her hands and wrote these long pages of letters against the brutal dictator Chairman Mao and the Chinese Communist Party at the time. So that includes a letter to the editorial department of the People's Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's mouthpiece. So these letters altogether is counted for over 140,000 words. 140,000 words. So on April 29th, 1968, Lin Zhao was sentenced to death in prison and was executed on the same day. History had recorded the Chinese Communist Party's military police went to her home and asked Lin Zhao's mother to pay for a bullet fee for 10 cents of Chinese currency for the execution of Lin Zhao's life. So that is the cruelty of the Communist Party. So in order to honor Lin Zhao with an anonymous donor who donated some funding, China Aid established the Lin Zhao Freedom Award to honor those freedom fighters and advocates like Lin Zhao. She was born in a Christian, family. Basically, she was educated. That's before Communist Party took power. In a Christian school, was converted to Christian faith, and after Communist Party took power, she was educated through the Chinese Communist Party's education system. So at times, basically, she almost lost her Christian faith, and with the instigation, propaganda, brainwashing her in the education system, all the way to Peking University, now called Beijing University. She believed in a very pure heart, the ideal of what Chairman Mao and his communist comrades advocated or propagated, a utopia world of communism where there's no suppression, with all human being are treated with absolute equality and freedom and labor enjoy in the commune. Then she has had her doubt after Chairman Mao's one political campaign after another, and witnessing the brutality of the class struggle, and millions of landlords were being executed, and Chairman Mao started this self-idolation, almost self-worship. And of course, seeing the different class of people were being treated so unequally, and some, of course, being so mistreated for basically having a college degree, and being accused of antagonistic intellectuals. So she started doubting and started raising questions, and then that led to her arrest, and essentially was sentenced to death in 1968. So when she was in prison with this massive writing of letters after letters with her own blood, and you can see her own kind of not only the reflection of the journey of her imprisonment, but deep in her heart, her Christian faith was revitalized, and obviously the Holy Spirit started kind of working more actively during that time. And she at one time, I want to just maybe read just one part of the letter showing her faith has come back. On November 22nd, 1967, 1 year before she was executed, she wrote the last blood letter home, acknowledging that her kind of agonizing protest had failed. This is what she said. She said, "I'm willing to submit to the Lord's will." That's the title. "Dear Mom," she wrote this to her mom, "after today's blood letter home in protest, starting tomorrow, I will bring this thing to a stop. Of course, you and I will not forget. Tomorrow is the 7th anniversary of Daddy's death." because her father basically committed suicide because of the political persecution against him. She said, in the past several days, I have thought a lot, at times quite painfully, because I was reflecting deeply on my own mistakes. Some of them were because of my inexperience in struggle, which are easier to correct. Others have to do with the rashness in my own personality. She was a very open-minded, bright young lady in Peking University at the time. She said, which I have to examine in a fundamental way. In any case, generally speaking, I tend to be overconfident in handling various problems. This is a serious problem, especially for a Christian. There's too much of me, quotation mark. As a result, there's too little or almost nothing of the Lord. I affirm myself too much, and I forget my Lord. I forget that in my proper station, I am but a servant. Alas, dear Mom, how hard it is for faith to come from the flesh. On the outside, I appear to have quite a bit of faith, but that is only faith in myself. What I'm able to do without the Lord's permission, without the Lord's guiding and keeping me. Dear Mom, I'm willing to learn to submit to the Lord's will. Let me turn over all my plans, hope, and dreams to my Lord, and let my heart and soul become the sacred temple where I worship the Lord. I'm quite willing to be silent so that I can think deeply and pray. May the Heavenly Father help me prevail over the devil. So this is her last bloody letter. She signed your daughter Zhao on November 22nd, 1967, the Lord's calendar. So she's a martyr, a young martyr. And unfortunately, when I just reviewed today the Fox Book of Martyrs for the modern day martyrs, published by the Voice of Martyrs, it says detailed martyrs from AD 33 to today. I checked Lin Zhao's name. Unfortunately, it was not there. So I hope one day we can crack that and ask the Voice of Martyrs to really supplement and add Lin Zhao's name. So for the Lin Zhao Freedom Award, we set up a few criteria for nominees. So you can go to our website, ChinaAid.org in English, or ChinaAid.net in Chinese, to submit the nominee. So the first criterion we set up by a nomination committee, an independent one, is number one, he or she must adhere to the spirit of nonviolent opposition to injustice and oppression advocated by Lin Zhao in the promotion of freedom and democracy, truth and reconciliation, rule of law, and the growth of civil society in contemporary China. Number two criterion is that he or she has suffered injustice and persecution in the process. Potential recipients include, the religious freedom and pro-democracy activists who are experiencing severe persecution, such as imprisonment, surveillance, house arrest, or other illegal persecution. So the nomination and selection committee, each year we select one, the recipient. So last year we have Miss Zhang Zhang, and the year before the recipient was the Christian human rights lawyer, Brother Gao Zhisheng. So Gao Zhisheng will be remembered for arbitrary enforced disappearance, kidnapping and missing for another 5 years by the middle of October in 2022. So Zhang Zhang, Sister Zhang Zhang is still serving in her prison for her whistleblowing work of COVID-19. So in support of the recipient, after the announcement, is about the renminbi 25,000 yuan, which is about $3,700 to support him or her family or his family. So 25,000, there is a meaning. The Communist Party claimed from 1931, when they were facing demise, being chased by the nationalist army, they launched the so-called Long March. They claimed they had walked 25,000 miles until basically they took power of China. So if you know someone in China who meet this criterion, please log on to China.org or China.net to make a nomination. And even if the candidate is not being awarded for this year's award, we'll still announce their names and ask the global Christian human rights community to pray to remember them when that the award occasion has come. And we certainly will also remember their families as well. So thank you for your attention, and may God bring freedom to China, to this 1.4 billion people, sooner than later. God bless you.
Thanks for that report, Bob. As he said, be sure to check out our website and nominate someone for the Lin Zhao Freedom Award. Speaking of, the historical chapel of the Jinan Presbyterian Church in Taiwan will hold a Taizé prayer service for a previous recipient of the Lin Zhao Freedom Award, Chinese human rights lawyer Gao Zhisheng. The prayer service will be held on August 10th. According to a bulletin by the Presbyterian Church, Lawyer Gao began his practice in 1996 as a voice for the marginalized groups in China, and he's been called the conscience of China. In 2001, Gao was honored by the Chinese Ministry of Justice and the official media as one of the, quote, China's top 10 lawyers. He angered the Chinese Communist Party authorities because he chose to defend Falun Gong practitioners, Chinese Christians, and farmers and private entrepreneurs. This also led Gao Zhisheng to being unjustly imprisoned, tortured, and physically and emotionally devastated. In 2020, lawyer Gao Zhisheng was awarded the Lin Zhao Freedom Award in recognition of his contributions to fighting for the rights of people oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. Lawyer Gao was also been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his human rights work. He was released from prison in 2014. Unfortunately, authorities continued to monitor him and deny him medical treatment. On August 23, 2017, Gao Zhisheng escaped from house arrest and headed to Shaanxi province with the help of 2 friends. However, he was arrested by authorities after 23 days in hiding. Gao Zhisheng remains in secret detention under the communist regime, despite serious concern from the international community. He has been a victim of enforced disappearance for 5 years now, and there has not been any indication or information on his current condition. Gao Zhisheng and his wife Geng He are both believers of Christ, and Gao once said, quote, "If I lose today, no one will believe in justice anymore. So he who has justice in his hand will not stand idly by. So God is fighting alongside us." End quote. We hope you can join us for this prayer service on August 10th, but please continue to pray for Gao and his family. Our next story is a breaking development from a prisoner of conscience, Zhang Haitao. After 4 years of preventing his family from meeting with him and denying correspondence for the last 2 years, Zhang's family recently received another letter from him in prison. Now, Zhang was sentenced to 19 years in prison by authorities for, quote, probing and illegally supplying the intelligence abroad because he posted 69 WeChat messages and took 13 photos of the streets of Xinjiang in order to promote freedom, democracy, and human rights. In a letter dated June 27th to his family, Zhang Haitao said, quote, "Everything has been good for me lately. No need to send money, and no need to come and visit." He specifically cited his food and clothing in his letter, saying, "The food is good. There's beef, mutton, chicken, fish, steamed buns, rice, vegetables, fruit, eggs, milk, and many others." And I want to be in prison now. Over the years, the standard of food has been increasing and the standard of living has been improving, and the level of education and healthcare has also been rising. I have enjoyed all of these benefits and rights, he also added. His wife, Li Aiji, who now resides in California, does not doubt that this is her husband's own handwriting in the written letter. But she has raised questions on whether the content of his letter came from his original intention, stating, quote, "Since everything is fine and his life in prison is better than the life of people outside the prison, then why has the family not been allowed to meet him?" It's a justified question. These words in the letter, which defy common sense, caused her to worry whether Zhang Haitao has been treated inhumanely in prison. She commented also, quote, "I seriously suspect that Zhang Haitao is being subjected to inhumane abuse and torture in prison." Mr. Ming Yangshin, a pro-democracy activist who is knowledgeable about China's prison environment, said, quote, "Improved meals are usually provided during festival periods, such as New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and Mid-Autumn Festival. The meals may be improved by providing some meat and maybe even dumplings. But on the norm, the food is usually very terrible." End quote. Zhang Haitao's letter also mentioned that he still has more than 8,000 yuan in his account, to which Li Aiji also commented, "My judgment is that the authorities did not allow him to spend this money. And he even said not to visit him. Is this the normal psychology of a person in solitary confinement?" She also stated that the letter ended in a very bizarre way with the words, "Thank you. Thank you to the party. Thank you to the country. Thank you to the government." As to whether or not the content of Zhang Haitao's letter originated from his own intention, pro-democracy activist Ming said, quote, "I am almost certain that in this kind of situation, it is written in advance by the police, and Zhang Haitao is forced to copy it down. This is more commonly seen. And the police also feel that this is the simplest form of doing this. Otherwise, if the person is forced to write sentence by sentence, and if it is written in an unsatisfactory manner that needs to be modified, it is then particularly laborious. Having a written copy to copy only once is then better. End the quote. So one thing is certain. The CCP hears us and Liaiji. We are not idiots. We know you have him, and we call for his immediate release. In our next story, the Stadium Biblicum Franciscanum of the Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong issued an announcement on July 25th that the Society's Chinese Bibles will face a shortage of stock, mostly because mainland Chinese printing houses are unwilling or unable to continue printing their Bibles. On July 25th, Friar Raymond Mary Yuen, a member of the society, posted the following on his Facebook public account. Quote, "The society has been unable to find a suitable printing house for the Catholic Chinese Bibles, and therefore has not been able to print new Catholic Chinese Bibles." Pretty simple. The friar also pointed out that at present, all of the society's stock of Catholic Chinese Bibles have been sold to bookstores, and if the printing problem is not resolved in the near future, there will be a shortage. In an interview with the Christian Times in Hong Kong, Friar Raymond Young revealed that in the past, the society's Bibles were printed by a printing house in mainland China, but the other party suddenly stopped their cooperation. This is because the printing company must apply to the government in order to print the Bibles legally. So, also, the society's original printing volume is not much, and the business profits for the mainland Chinese printing company were not very high. So, taking some of these things into consideration, mainland manufacturers will no longer print Bibles for the society to avoid trouble. Reverend Yuan, he spoke very frankly that it is not easy to find a new printing house because printing Bibles requires a certain technical threshold for the binding and all of that other sort of stuff. Bible production also involves staple binding technology, which is not available in Hong Kong. He also mentioned that the Bible Society is basically out of stock, and all of the Bibles that have been sent to distributors and parish schools at this time. Other faith-based publications can be printed in Hong Kong without incident, though. And as for the printing of Protestant Bibles, the Christian Times reported that Reverend Liao Jian, the Hong Kong Director General of the Worldwide Bible Society, pointed out that the Society's Bibles are mainly printed there in Hong Kong and South Korea. So all of the Protestant Bibles are not going to be facing some sort of shortage. This is mostly focused on the Catholic version. Their operation isn't affected at all. But the Stadium Biblicum version of the Chinese Bible was printed in Nanjing Amity Printing, a joint venture between the Amity Foundation and the United Bible Societies, UBS, in 1988. It is only the printing company in mainland China designated to print Christian Bibles and hymnals, and has been printing Bibles for the Catholic Church in China since 1994. Now, our next story is about the International Christian Concern NGO. Every year, NGOs and other nonprofit groups release their annual reports concerning religious freedom or human rights. International Christian Concerns Persecution.org released its Persecutor of the Year awards. This is a report. It selects the worst oppressors in 3 categories: country, entity, and individual. Afghanistan, Fulani militants, and Ali Khamenei were recognized in their respective categories this year, but each section highlights dishonorable mentions. International Christian Concern clarifies direct and indirect persecution. from arrests, imprisonment, and torture to education discrimination and denial of rights. They also define sources of persecution, including radical Islam and Marxism. In their section about China, they mention how Xi Jinping's plan for Sinicization is weaponized against house churches. Quote, "The CCP believes that they can shape religion into a tool of national security, promoting national unity, love of country, and love of party." They continued, "State-sanctioned religious organizations managed by the United Front Work Department oversee all religious practices in China. Those operating outside the state's apparatus or challenge its instructions are liable to face punishment by Chinese authorities." End quote. So to understand more about the nature of persecution and read the Persecutor Awards for 2022, visit persecution.org. Now, that's all the time that we have for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless.